So hello everyone, this is Josh from SIBO Survivor, and I'm super excited to be joined by Phoebe today from feedmephoebe.com. A little bio about Phoebe before we get into kind of her healing journey and what's been helpful for her. So Phoebe Lapine is a food and health writer. Did I say that name right? Is it Lapine or?
Lapine.
Lapine. Yeah, I try not to mess up the names because it's hard sometimes. So she's a food and health writer over at feedmephoebe.com, a gluten-free chef, wellness expert, culinary instructor, and she's dealt with Hashimoto, so she's an advocate and a speaker born and raised in New York City, where she continues to live and to eat. On her award-winning blog, feedmephoebe.com, she shares recipes for healthy comfort food and insights about lifestyle choices beyond what's on your plate. She was named by Women's Health Magazine as the top nutrition read of 2017. And Phoebe's best-selling debut memoir, The Wellness Project, chronicles her journey with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And she finally found the middle ground between health and hedonism by making one lifestyle change 1 month at a time. That's very cool. But her latest project is a new podcast all about SIBO, and it's called SIBO Made Simple. And so that's one of the reasons I just wanted to reach out to Phoebe and to kind of have her on to chat, just because she's also dealt with SIBO alongside the thyroid issue. So it'll just be very informative and even inspiring to help people learn from your journey. So awesome to have you, Phoebe.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to chat with your SIBO community.
Yeah, definitely. And I know they'll love kind of learning. So let's get right into it. Let's jump into your health story a little bit. So I guess, when did you start to have, I guess, the thyroid issue, and then where did kind of the digestive stuff come in after that?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's a decade ago, more than a decade ago, when I was 22, and just by my regular childhood doctor, which was super lucky because so many women go undiagnosed for hypothyroidism, and specifically the autoimmune variety, and she honed right in my blood work right away. However, she didn't really explain that there was any other avenue besides being on medication for the rest of my life. And for whatever reason, I was not, very health-minded at the time. I did grow up with a mom who was like a little bit more holistic. But I think because I wasn't too symptomatic at the time, or rather the symptoms weren't even really described to me, I just decided to pretend the conversation never happened and go on living my life. And that was both a blessing and a curse, because I think, it was probably the right idea that being on medication for the rest of my life was not necessarily something I wanted to sign up for, but I wasn't really mature enough at the time to explore the holistic side and actually make some changes. So I kind of slowly made my way to the bottom of Health Mountain over the next few years, and eventually just started experiencing all of the throes of hypothyroidism, and digestive symptoms were definitely one of them, but also just crushing fatigue, which, a lot of Hashi-Pasi people, I'm sure, can identify with. I was a chef at the time, like an aspiring young food writer and chef. So like the digestive issues were certainly an occupational hazard. But then also it's like my skin was a mess. My hair was falling out. I'd wake up in the middle of the night soaked in sweat. But was, again, exhausted. So eventually I kind of started to dip my toes into more the holistic side of things. And then it was kind of like the pendulum swung from one direction to the other. I got completely bogged down and a little bit obsessive with all of the different conflicting opinions out there, which is certainly, something that applies to SIBO as well. And eventually kind of landed at this aha moment, which led to my book, The Wellness Project, and the kind of year-long exploration that it was based off of. So I decided to kind of take a step back and try and distill everything I needed to do in order to be quote unquote well into really manageable, actionable steps. And so, I kind of had a different focus every month, and then came up with little baby steps in that month to get me to my goal. And I covered everything, that's kind of important for 360 wellness. And they're the things that, people don't really talk about enough. But, like really basic, like sleep, hydration, posture, movement, for me, hormone health / women's health, I'm like blanking on all the different ones. Diet, of course, but also switching over personal care products and naturals. And yeah, it was really interesting to see how all the pieces added up slowly but surely over the course of the year. And my numbers really did take kind of a black and white 360 improvement, but I kind of say that wasn't necessarily my overarching goal to be healthy on paper, although of course that was nice, but it was really, as you said before, to find the middle ground between health and hedonism, to learn how to do right by my body without giving up my life. Since of course, when you're really sick and there's a whole laundry list of even holistic minded things that you can do to be better, the treatment can start to cause more stress than the original illness did in the first place. So it was all about avoiding that.
Yeah, so true. And like, just all that stuff you just talked about is just so applicable to everyone I talk to, because when you come down with SIBO or IBS or a digestive issue, just like you did, or with a thyroid issue, a lot of times, just like your story, right? People go to the doctor, they give them maybe a diagnosis and maybe some drugs, right? And it helps a little bit, but then they realize at some point or another, like they realize that, okay, in order to live healthily, over the long term, it takes more than just taking something like a drug or something. And it's like you talked about, it's these little changes over time. It's all this holistic approach to healing that goes into it, whether it's diet, lifestyle, sleep, posture, hydration, all that stuff matters when you're trying to heal your body. So I guess
it does take time. I think when I was in my mid to late 20s, the idea of doing this year-long project was insane. I was like, that is so long. Yeah. And now I just think it's crazy that I ever thought I could make meaningful change in less time. Yeah. I think that's another thing that medical professionals sometimes, there are obviously fantastic ones out there who do acknowledge this, but kind of a shortcoming on both the holistic side and the conventional side is just, wanting to get results, which is, as a doctor, I would want to get results quickly as well. But, sometimes it's just going to be less jarring than turning your world upside down overnight to draw out the goals and take it slow.
Yeah. So I guess let's start after, you kind of found out from your doctor you had a thyroid issue. Were the digestive symptoms, were they there right away, or did that develop?
Yeah, so they were there at the beginning. Autoimmune disease is still fairly mysterious on how it expresses itself, but having some sort of gut trigger is a lot of the time one of the contributing factors. And for me, I definitely think it was a combination of things, stress being one of them. But I also had a really bad bout of food poisoning back in, I guess it was the year before I was diagnosed in Morocco. Okay. And I think that just completely changed my gut for good. And I eventually found out that I had parasite. I was like, spoiler alert, climax of the book, and got rid of that. But it was really, kind of the year post-project. I guess maybe it was 2 years post-project, but I started to feel some of the digestive symptoms creeping back, the bloat. And, I was on book tour, so I kind of was like, oh, I'm just really stressed out. So I didn't really acknowledge it too much. And then once I had time to kind of breathe and reevaluate and tune in, I was like, oh, no, this isn't normal. Went back, got a full workup. And that was the first time I was ever tested for SIBO. I don't know, people ask me, they're like, do you think you had it all along or whatnot? I actually do think it was something that cropped up in that year. And hypothyroidism is, a root cause of SIBO because of the lack of motility that it causes. And so that was my first time, though, even having done all of this research on Hashimoto's, that I'd even heard about SIBO being, you know, kind of a concurrent condition a lot of the time. So I kind of spent the next year, like Wellness Project 2.0, really deep diving on SIBO. And that was almost exactly a year ago. Here I am, podcast, really went all in. And it's been really encouraging to be able to put everything I've learned out there and help other people heal.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of hearing your story, a lot of people develop SIBO like that, right? I mean, that's what the research has shown as well, that sometimes a trigger like food poisoning can cause, you know, the nerves to function not optimally. So,
right. And the more food like if you get food poisoning once, then you're more likely to get it again and again and again. Yeah. I don't think my first bout of food poisoning in Morocco necessarily caused, you know, I think SIBO is fairly recent, but I also think that first parasite and, you know, it's just been like a struggle ever since then to rebalance my microbiome. And I've had a whole lots and lots of food poisoning since then.
Yeah. So. I mean, unfortunately, right, like people with digestive issues, SIBO in particular, are more susceptible, right, to getting food poisoning. Because, like, for example, I like to travel as well, and I do have to be more careful because it's easier for me to get something, and I know that. So, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but like your story as well, like some of these chronic conditions kind of, you know, it's kind of a domino effect where one may affect the other may affect that. So, yeah, it's very interesting. So I guess getting back to kind of your health journey, so obviously, like chatting with you today, you've come a long way since like getting, let's say, the thyroid diagnosis, and then even coming down with some of the SIBO and digestive issues. So I guess what treatments have helped, or what we'll get more into kind of the lifestyle strategies, but have there been any treatments or anything that's really helped you along that path to kind of get better?
Yeah. So I mean, again, when I was diagnosed with SIBO, I didn't know much about it. I was lucky to have a functional medicine doctor who gave me, you know, not like a full swath of information, but at least gave me a protocol that involved diet in addition to herbal antimicrobials, which is what I did. I did the biotics protocol, and then did kind of a modified low FODMAP diet layered into that. But I'd say there were definitely, it was like kind of the lifestyle-y things that are not quite acknowledged enough for both. Well, I'd say they are acknowledged for Hashimoto's, but kind of going back to like the framework I built in the Wellness Project with all of these different, you know, kind of self-care prongs of the toolkit, I think was also really important for SIBO. And also especially just like with the modified low FODMAP diet, that was definitely the most restrictive diet I've ever been on, and the most complicated. And it was kind of my foray into writing about SIBOs a few years before I started getting all these requests for low FODMAP recipes. And it was funny because I wrote all these tips on how to cook for a low FODMAP diet, having never done it myself. And ironically, 3 years later, I was like, I'm going to have to actually look at my own writing for advice. And then I was like, these tips are pretty good, and got to take them for a test drive myself. But, you know, I think learning a lot about kind of the structural root causes for SIBO, and, you know, we mentioned posture, you know, just kind of being able to already be thinking about these issues in kind of a holistic 360 framework was really helpful. I'm still kind of working on some of these pieces, especially the structural piece. But yeah, and then learning a little bit more about intermittent fasting, why like it's good, not good, why it's helpful for some people and not others, things that you have to be careful of as a woman when doing intermittent fasting, but then also just kind of learning more about how the migrating motor complex works, which is in a fasting state of 90 minutes or more, and just kind of reframing my meals to give my digestive system time to fully empty and street sweep. I think a lot of people get really caught up in the what of diet and eating and don't think enough about the how. And especially with SIBO, I think the how we're eating mindfully, slowly, whether it's, some people will be snacking on very healthy things all the time that fit within a low FODMAP diet, but then again, you're not managing your motility properly. For SIBO especially, I just think really reevaluating your habits along those lines is so important.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And from my experience as well, it's like you said, it's really kind of when you have a better understanding of like the cause of your issue and everything that surrounds it. Like, for example, when you understand the motility issue and maybe why you're developing this, maybe it's you have another condition that's affecting it, like it really helps you to kind of manage things in a better way. And a lot of times people get like you're talking about, like some of the diets are very restrictive, and sometimes people can focus a little bit too much on like exactly everything they put into their body, right? Instead of thinking about the things that you just discussed, like the way you're eating, allowing time between meals to allow that function to work. So do you today, do you follow a strict diet, or do you what does that look like? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I tried to get back on, my favorite low FODMAP veggies, which are very good for you, kind of as soon as possible. I took it very, very slow, the reintroduction, but, the more people I interviewed and talked to, I think a big pitfall of treatment is just getting a little bit too rigid about the diet, not understanding that even during the strictest periods, it's not about perfection. So it actually did fundamentally change the way I cook. I don't cook with a whole lot of garlic and onion anymore, which is like sacrilege in my profession. But I just really found that I didn't miss it so much. And it is something that in large quantities still affects me to a certain degree. And yeah, I don't know. So I think I'm just much more mindful of my quantities now, but I try and not restrict too many specific ingredients. So yeah, pretty much back on the bandwagon. Legumes bothered me prior to SIBO, so I know that I can't eat large quantities of beans and lentils and chickpeas and things without having problems. But I don't know. I recently interviewed Kate Scarlatta, who's like the queen of FODMAPs, on my podcast. That episode's coming out on the 23rd of January. And, it was interesting to hear how she kind of, reintroduces and just like plays around with various ingredients. And there was an anecdote that I was going to tell you, but now it's just like completely out of my mind. But she was also talking a lot about how it just can't be a black and white thing. And also, now I remember the anecdote, just about when you reintroduce, it has to be like a real event in order for it to be a failure. Like a little bit of bloat, a little bit of gas is not that big of a deal. That's not a failed test. That's something that you can work through over time as you like slowly retrain your body to be able to tolerate certain ingredients. But I know that if I eat massive quantities of legumes or some other things, then maybe I'll have, an event.
Yeah.
That's not positive. But I try not to shy too much away from just like a little bit of bloat here and there, because I know that these ingredients are incredibly good for my large intestine long term. And long term, I have a lot of work to do in terms of improving my microbiome, which will only, strengthen my whole system against SIBO going forward.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, because I think people need to keep in mind that it's a long-term journey, right? So like you do need the overall microbiome health. If you can incorporate a larger variety of foods, it's going to be better to strengthen your body and to get it back to where it was originally. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind as well. And like you're saying, like from my experience, I do find that myself included, that is still like the legumes like you're talking about, and then the garlic and onion are like the main. A lot of people have those as their main, like kind of, I'd say, foods to really be careful with, even for the longer term, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, I don't know. Stress is such an insidious factor for all of this. I was in Italy over the summer and was pretty relaxed about
Yeah.
a lot of things. And I definitely, I was just not thinking about it, and just like generally in terms of life, feeling a lot more loosey goosey than usual. And I didn't have as big of an issue with the garlic and the onion.
Exactly.
But now back in my everyday life, which does include more stress than I would like, and is, a lifelong wellness project I'm going to have to work through, certain foods actually do have more of an impact. So it's just always important to remember the mental side of things. And especially if you're worried about restricting your food or having certain things on your plate, like just learning to kind of tease your mind into relaxing about it is so important.
Yeah, definitely. So, I want to kind of dive into some of the strategies of like just overall wellness that you learned from your year project and how that's helped you like with, getting better and improving from having SIBO and things like that. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've learned that are really helpful?
Yeah. So some of my kind of like overarching healthy hedonism mantras, which definitely came into play a bit with my SIBO treatment. One of them is you have to kind of set yourself up for success at home in order to find more flexibility out in the world. And again, just like alleviate the stress of not being in control of your environment. So for me, setting myself up for success at home involved a lot of kind of one-time switches. So not in terms of the eating front, but personal care products, a big one, switch all those to naturals.
Yeah.
It did cost some money up front, and definitely, was a learning curve in terms of some of my favorite makeup items and things like that. Hair items are a big one. But now it's something that doesn't have to clog up mental space at all. It's just the way I live. Don't have to overthink it, versus food, which unfortunately, is something that is going to take up a little bit of mental space 3 times a day. Another one was switching my water filter. Putting a water filter on my tap to eliminate fluoride, chlorine, kind of some of those baddies, which in particular for thyroid health can be problematic. And, similar to the alleviating the toxic burden from your personal care products. Unfortunately, these changes are not going to have like a giant impact overnight, and maybe the same way as drastically changing your diet. Like you actually may feel it within 24 hours.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things that, again, over time, just brings me to like a different plateau and allows my body to be able to handle maybe some suboptimal choices on the food front, which, will make me feel like I'm grabbing life by the horns a little bit more than just, constantly stressing about each and every choice. So on the food front, in terms of setting myself up for success at home, I just don't buy products as much anymore that contain a lot of added sugar. I think that's another pitfall for SIBO is, the low FODMAP diet obviously reduces certain types of sugar, but in theory, regular old refined table sugar is fine. So, and yet it's obviously, not great for feeding bacteria. So, and not great for a lot of different things. I mean, keeping your liver healthy is so important for any sort of detox, any sort of healing. Yeah. And eating too much sugar of any kind is going to make, your blood sugar go to a little berserk, and that distracts your liver from all of the other important chores on its plate. So for me, that was kind of a huge lifestyle overhaul, was paying a lot more attention to the sugar content in everyday healthy foods, healthy gluten-free bars that I was eating every morning, and just making sure that I wasn't stocking my shelves with too much mindless sugar.
Gotcha. So as far as, because I know you're a cook, so this was probably, you talked about like the big shift of like your cooking in the past and how you changed. And then as far as like keeping on track with let's say a gut friendly diet, something where you're avoiding the main things that cause issues, or do you like meal plan, or how do you kind of go about that?
Yeah. So, well, semi-ironically, I actually did have a full chapter dedicated to cooking, which seems weird because obviously it's not something I need to learn how to do, but doing it as a professional for other people all the time actually totally detracted from my own self-care cooking. So actually relearning how to meal prep and batch cook for myself was something that just on a habit plane was, kind of a bit of a learning curve for myself. I knew how to execute it, but I didn't, kind of quite wrap my head around how to fit it into my schedule every single week. So that's been a big thing for me, and it's something I'm very passionate about. I have a 4-week program called 4 Weeks to Wellness, and I don't do like strict like breakfast, lunch, and dinner meal plans. I do these batch cooking meal plans. So 4 to 5 recipes that you can cook in 1 to 2 sessions and then just have on hand for the week. And I think that's just such a beneficial skill for people to learn. And I get a lot of people through my program and my group who are not secure at all in the kitchen and just learning the ropes. But seriously, doing it in 1 session, even though it seems like a little bit daunting, especially in terms of the time commitment, it really teaches you how to cook smarter, not harder. How to use, vegetables start to finish, so you don't have to stress about, having anything rotting or wilting away in your fridge. And I don't know, I think just always having that food at your fingertips, especially if you're on a really restrictive diet like low FODMAP, is just half the battle. And then again, kind of it limits the amount of time that you are going to be, outside your home scavenging for meals, but also can just like take a little bit of the pressure off in those few cases when you are going to have to maybe not have a perfect night out at a restaurant.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think it's one of the hardest parts when you come down with one of these digestive issues, and you kind of have to be more careful about what you eat, is that it's stressful, right? If you don't know how to cook and you don't know how to do it smart, like you're talking about. So in that course, do you offer, if someone has SIBO and they're like on a little more restricted diet, is that still going to be fine for them?
Oh yeah, I have actually a whole low FODMAP batch cooking meal plan that's like a track. And this session I just started, there are actually a lot of SIBO people in it.
Nice.
And it's funny because, the program's not at all designed for SIBO in particular, but all the lifestyle things you're learning, like we just discussed, like are so beneficial, like learning how to create a morning routine, meditation, or finding something each day that's going to kind of bring your stress level back, that's going to kind of be self-tithing and focusing that energy on yourself versus others. Various sleep hygiene hacks / small baby step changes. And then, of course, the batch cooking, hydration, movement. I mean, like healing anything, you kind of can't get overly preoccupied with just one piece of the puzzle. It really is, a complete picture.
Yeah. And then the other thing I liked about, you were talking about when you did the wellness project, was it like a year-long project, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And it was
so the 4 weeks of wellness is like it on herbal steroids, I say. So we're like really fitting in a lot of the learnings into a 4-week span, but you can kind of choose any time frame you want to make these changes. It's really just the idea of kind of one at a time, so you can see the impact, so you can feel the impact, and ultimately just decide what's actually worth your time, money, and energy, because we can't do all of the above all at once. That's when we get into stress territory.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, like going through that and focusing on one thing a month, I imagine that really helped, because even me personally, like I still struggle with this, where like I just try and do so much all at the same time, right? And then you end up not doing anything well, or like giving your
self-care
body
burnout is a real thing.
Exactly. So, I mean, going through that year-long process, like I would imagine that probably really helped your health just in and of itself, right?
Yeah, because I mean, it was so funny. My editor and other people were like, what do you mean it's not cumulative? How are you going to be healthier if it's not cumulative? And I'm like, it's psychological. Like some of the stuff that was inherently easy for me and pleasurable, and pleasure, healthy hedonism being a huge aspect, it automatically carried over. I didn't have to think about it too much. And then the things that, I really didn't enjoy, like cutting out caffeine, alcohol, and sugar,
Yeah.
cold turkey. Those were kind of a learning curve. And like in life, some months were better than others, but it's all about moderation in the real world. We can't be on, these sprints or executing these challenges year round. It's just exhausting. So it's giving yourself permission to have the ebb and flow. And then, when you get a little bit off kilter in certain areas, then that's your focus for the next month.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of to, I guess, wrap up kind of your health story a little bit. So when you started coming down with the digestive issues and the thyroid stuff, has it taken you a while? Has it been gradual steps? Because I like to, for a lot of people, me included, people need to understand that this is like a holistic process and it does take time and small steps, right, in order to get better. So has it been like a gradual process for you to improve?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been one step forward, two steps back, unfortunately. And, part of living with an autoimmune disease, I'm just inherently more sensitive to things. Again, my gut probably will be something that I'm working on for many years to come. But, so the SIBO, I was SIBO free at a certain point. Not sure what the status is right now because it's a chronic condition. Yeah. But I did discover this past fall that I have a whole host of other gut things that I need to take care of, including H. pylori, which is another contributing factor to SIBO. So that could have been a secondary root cause for me, and then a couple new fun different parasites. But people are asking, did you have these things all along? I don't really know. For me, it's like slowly peeling away the onion. That's the process. And so for that first year of the Wellness Project, I was really dealing with, kind of teaching myself those habits, as I said, slowly but surely, and learning more about the thyroid. And now it's kind of like digging in slowly year after year on some of the root causes of, the hypothyroidism to begin with. And then of course, that fun chicken or the egg element in terms of what it's doing for causing SIBO. So, it's always discouraging to get bad news back from tests from the doctor, but you have to keep asking the questions. You have to keep searching and just know that, there's never going to be a quick fix, unfortunately. And if you're someone out there who also has, had the discouraging experience of continuing to find new things that are wrong with you and feeling like you can never catch a break, I completely understand. I am there right now, but eventually you will see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's all also just the silver lining is it's a learning experience. As you're learning more about your body, you're becoming, a better student in the skin you're in. And for me, another silver lining is also, again, just being able to share the knowledge with other people, because especially for SIBO, considering the number of people who are affected, the awareness isn't really there yet. So I'm really happy to be doing the SIBO Made Simple podcast in hopes that, people who know a friend with IBS who hasn't been able to get answers for many years, maybe listens to it and gets prompted to get tested and hopefully finds an answer, even again, if it's an answer that isn't necessarily going to be a walk in the park.
Cool. And then tell us a little bit more about that. When is it starting? And where do people tune in to learn more about that?
Yeah, so the first 3 episodes drop on the 16th, which is tomorrow. Okay. So it'll definitely be live by the time you see this. Yeah. And it's going to be one season for now, with a different episode dropping every Wednesday. So definitely subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And if you subscribe to my newsletter on my site, you'll also get access to free transcripts of every episode, which are really helpful, especially since there's just a lot of nitty-gritty stuff that we go over every episode. I personally love going back over through the transcripts because, I'm a layman myself and don't always completely absorb every single little piece of information. And yeah, there are some incredible doctors and experts on this season. And then so it's 10 episodes. I pre-recorded them. But there's also a Facebook community where you can ask questions, and there's going to be a bonus episode called the Ask the Doctor episode, where I'm going to go back to all the experts we've had so far and make sure that your questions get answered by the end of the season. So it should be really fun.
Nice. That's awesome. So can they just go to your website to find the podcast, or?
Yes. So if you go to feedmephoebe.com, there's a little thing in the nav that says podcasts. You can see all the episodes, watch the trailer, and then, just search SIBO Made Simple wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Awesome. And then last question is, do you have a bunch of you have a bunch of recipes on your website, right? That people can check out.
So many recipes.
Yeah. So.
A lot of low FODMAP stuff. And if you want to search Phoebe low FODMAP recipes, there's a free ebook that I have with healthy weeknight low FODMAP meals. So I've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. And it's a good resource.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and chatting, Phoebe. And it was a joy chatting with you and just learning from someone who's kind of been down the road, right, of coming down with these issues, these chronic issues. And, you've come a long way, it seems like. And it's just encouraging for people to hear your story, learn that there is hope, that you can improve your health and get to a point in life where, you're feeling better and you've learned a lot and you've grown a lot from the experience. So I really appreciate you coming on.
This was really fun. Thank you so much for having me. Good luck to everyone out there.